and welcome to Round Robin. I'm your host, Robin McCormick with the City of Hampton, and today we're going to talk about using summertime to connect with your kids. My guest is one of my favorites, Alvean Lyons. Welcome back.
Thanks, Robin.
It's so good to make sure that we do this discussion on a regular basis and stop and think about how we're parenting, how we're doing our relationships. It helps me get back in track.
Well, I totally love it because we're both having like therapy here as we're talking about it. Because no matter how much you talk about these kinds of things, it's so easy for it to fall off your radar in your personal world.
There's too much
we just get so
on.
busy. It's so true. And that has nothing to do with not being a good parent or being a connected parent or even a committed parent. It's just that life happens.
It gets in the way
and
of
we're
things.
all just trying to figure out how to keep it going the best we possibly can, regardless of all the things that are on our plate at the same time.
And summer's a little bit easier time to stop and think about those things because they're not going to school. There's not homework every night. The rhythm changes a little bit and you can go,
That's exactly right. And a lot of times we don't use our summers as well as we probably could as parents. You know, it is a time for, and I'll be honest, I was one of those parents that I loved Fridays as much as my kids did. Okay, yes, no homework, because it really is. Like, if you're a parent who is serious about your kids performing well, homework happens to you too.
Yeah.
So you may
that's true.
not be doing it for your child, but you are the one who's making sure it's time to sit down, let's get this stuff done, what's going on. When they're losing focus, you're refocusing them. It's all of those things that really becomes you too.
And it dominates your discussion with your kids.
It's very true. It's very true, especially if you have one that doesn't enjoy the process.
Yeah.
As most kids don't, quite frankly, not because they're not bright, but it's just sometimes it feels like a lot of busy work and they don't love that when they could be outside with their friends instead. So it is a time for us to be able to pause for a second, to kind of go into cruise mode, but in a way that says, let's rethink how we're using this. You know, let's not just waste this time and sleep till 2 o'clock every day. And, you know, and the kids will, because they'll try to stay up much later. They don't have bedtimes. You know, like, so it really can turn into a wasted period of time if we're not careful about it. They can totally get consumed with social media and TV and all of those things that, while in proportion, are perfectly appropriate.
Sure.
But when they become excessive, you know, you barely have even spoken to your kids because they have, you know, 2 little earplugs in their ears all day long and they have a little device in front of them. That's when it starts to move to a place where it's no longer productive. So we want to use this summertime as an opportunity to really connect with our kids in a way that we just don't always get a chance to do during the school year.
Right. And you have some tips, I hope.
I always do. You know, I come with my bag of tricks. So we're going to talk about the 3 C's for the summertime.
Okay.
So first C is clarity. A lot of times when we're talking as parents, we're just talking. And particularly if you have teens, you have a very small window before they start to tune you out. And they don't mean to, but it's just, they quickly do the math. Does this apply to me? Do I really need all of this? Is this going to affect whether or not I can go over my friend's house or whether or not I'm going to be able to see that movie? And over a very short period of time, it becomes the want, want, want from Charlie Brown.
Right.
So we have to be clear about what is the goal in our communication. We call it the goal factor when we talk about clarity. What do you want to happen during this conversation? And that's not to say that you walk into every conversation saying that, okay, here's the strategy, here's the end point, this is what I need to make sure is accomplished. I don't mean that, because that would not be organic conversation. But I am saying that when you need to have a conversation about something you know is meaningful and important, particularly if it includes things like where your child is coming and going, because during the summertime, that's when they want to do a lot of social stuff. We can't get to the point as parents where, yes, it's important we trust our kids, but that we're no longer parenting. So they're just running in and out of the house, and we don't have a clue who they're with, where they're going. Are there other parents involved? What's the plan? All of those things are important to know. So when we have conversation, we want to be sure that those things are answered in the conversation. If we're just talking and talking and talking, before you know it, you've spent 15 minutes, but you have no information. So we don't want that to happen. So we want parents to walk into the conversation clear about what it is you want to either communicate to your child or what you want to hear from your child.
Right.
So clarity matters.
Okay.
Then we're going to move to content. A lot of times we call that the stuff factor. When we're communicating with each other, it's both the me talking to you and you hearing and understanding what I'm saying, and then you talking to me and me hearing and understanding what you're saying. And a lot of times, because kids have so much, particularly teens, going on in their world, we get lost in the stuff sometimes. And when our kids are talking, we have a tendency to want to focus only on the things that apply directly to our child and how it's going to affect us.
Just what you said about their ability to listen to us is our ability to listen to them.
It's
how funny
so
that is.
true. Like, we are just grown-up versions of them. And somehow we forget that sometimes. The same way that we just want to talk and we trust that they'll just listen and we want them to just listen is how they feel about us. Sometimes they just want to talk and they want to just share, and we have a tendency to tune out because it doesn't sound important right now.
Maybe they're talking about two friends and the problem
Right,
the friends are having, and it's like, I
we're
have
just
a work
like, oh my
deadline,
God,
and
I have
need to,
10 things I need to do. Does this have anything to do with mommy? You know, like, and we have that thing that we do sometimes,
Yeah.
but we can't. We have to make a conscious effort not to do that. Because believe me, if your teens are talking about it, it matters to them. If they're talking about what they saw on Vine, if they're talking about the latest Twitter, if they're talking about the Twitter fight, if they're talking about what was on Snapchat, all of these social media outlets, if they're talking about it, it registered to them. You want to be mindful of what stuff is registering.
And why.
And why, exactly. What is it that matters to them? Why does that matter to them the way that it does? How are they processing that? Because they could be talking about, and unfortunately we see it too often, that there are all kinds of fights and inappropriate stuff that goes on social media. So much of it, too much of it, quite honestly. But if our kids are talking about it, they're processing that. We want to know, how are you processing that? Because if you're processing being inappropriately dressed or being violent with another person, you want to watch this horrible fight that's taking place, that where are the adults? Where is law enforcement? Who's there to be able to make sure that everything is okay? Did anybody call anybody? You know, or is the child that was in the fight okay? You want to hear, what is your teen saying about that? Is your teen laughing about the fact that there was somebody being beat up on video? Do they think that it's cool that there are a gang of people picking on somebody else that's different than them? We want to know, because if we're listening, we find out so much about where they are on the inside. So we can't get lost in the stuff to the point that we're not recognizing the value of the content, because it gives us excellent opportunities as parents to rewrite the script. Hey, baby, this is what we would expect in our house. If you see somebody being picked on, or bullied, or treated inappropriately, if you see illegal activity going on, you contact somebody. You can't always go in and break that up. You can't always be the person to say something in the moment because it might be a safety issue. But you don't just leave it there. You need to know what to do when you see that kind of stuff and how you should process that stuff. We need to know that our values in this house about being good people, quality people of character, are also being reflected in how you're responding to the things that you're seeing and interacting with. So that would be our second C.
All right.
Content. And then finally, the last C would be compassion. It seems like a big word sometimes, and it requires a lot of feelings, but we have to be compassionate with our teenager in the way that we communicate and in the way that we process what they say. Sometimes we forget that we were that age. You know, the things that make sense to them may not make sense to us in the same way now.
Yeah.
And we have a tendency to hold them to adult standards in ways that they're just not prepared to be. Not as a teenager.
Drama matters so much at that age. And it's very easy to downplay it and say, oh, you know, you'll get over that. That's no big deal.
That's so true.
But when it was my drama, it mattered a lot.
It was everything, okay?
Yeah.
A bad hair day was everything. You know, who was not talking to you today was everything. Who was hanging out with whom was everything. I mean, it was our whole world once upon a time.
Right.
But we can't get to the point in our lives where we forget that. that it's just, oh, suck it up, stop crying, it's not a big deal. But what if those tears are really indicative of something so much deeper? She's not just mad that her hair looked bad today, but really she's crying because this is the 19th time that she's been picked on about not being pretty or not being pretty enough or not being the inside, part of the inside crowd. And before you know it, you have poo-pooed something that really is an issue that really needs to be addressed. Do we need to talk about self-confidence, or is there a situation that we actually need to get involved in?
Is there a bullying situation?
Absolutely.
Is there something bigger picture?
Absolutely. And we won't know it if we just poo-poo everything. If we lack compassion for the things that are not necessarily about us all the time, that aren't necessarily affecting us directly, that may be, in fact, minor. Sometimes it is minor.
Sure.
It really isn't a big deal, baby. You're not even going to remember him next year. Sometimes it is minor. But the reality is, to your child,
Right then.
in that moment.
It's not next year.
Right. Today, this is terrible. And we need to treat them like we get that. And if we want to open those lines of communication, we need to make sure that we are a safe place for them to be their full selves with us. And if that means that I'm silly and ridiculous sometimes, if that means that the little things seem enormous to me, still be a place where it's okay for me to tell you the little things.
And if they tell you the little things,
they'll tell you the big things.
Right.
And that's exactly right. And it's not as complex as we make it sometimes. It's really just pause for a second and think about how would you have wanted your parents to respond to you when you were that age going through those things.
it's hard not to offer your kids solutions. Every time, still to this day, sorry, Mom, I talk to Mom about something, she starts trying to solve my problems.
Fix it.
My grandmother didn't. My grandmother would be, oh, poor baby. So now I have to tell people in my life, it's like, no, I don't want solutions. I need to be a poor baby for a minute, and that's all you need to say. But, you know, be there with me, and then I can figure out the solutions later.
Absolutely.
But don't jump ahead. Let me have the emotions right now.
That is so fantastic, because that's actually true, even in friendship. You know, sometimes I just want to vent. I just want to vent, and I'm not going to jump off the cliff, I promise. I just need to get this out. And then after that, I'll be fine. But while I'm stuffing it, it's consuming me on the inside.
Right.
So I need to release this. The same thing is true for our kids.
And they learn that. And
That
if they
is
get shut
absolutely
down,
right.
or if they get too much problem solving to where their emotions aren't being listened to and respected. Right.
They start stuffing. And the more stuff that they have to stick in there, the greater that wall is being built between you and I. And the one thing that every parent could agree is that we don't want any barriers between us and our kids.
Especially our teens. It's, you know, it's just easy for that barrier to grow, for them to withdraw, you know, that's the age at which you as a parent don't really know anything. You know? When your kids are younger, they recognize that you do know some things, and then that goes away for a little while, and then we all hope it comes back.
Absolutely.
But you don't want it to go away altogether.
And the only way to ensure that it does not go away and stay gone is to make sure that in those stages, and it's a natural stage because they're trying to assert their independence, and they need to for them to be effectively launched into the world as young adults. So that's okay that they're working on that. But we want to make sure that while they go through that process, there hasn't been such a large wall that's built between us that there is no place for us to reconnect once you've come through it. We move into a permanent space where there's this huge gap between us.
Right.
We don't want that. So to have a little teeny wall that you can step over, not a big deal. We will move past that as you become older and more mature. But if I make you stuff everything that is real and important to you, and I don't recognize what it is that matters to you, then eventually you see it as I don't get you as a
Right.
human being altogether. And you will search for spaces where somebody does. And that's,
Then you turn to your peers.
and that's exactly what happens. You end up finding that's when the idea of hanging around with the wrong crowd or the wrong group of people, or that's where that starts. So we have to make sure that we are the most influential people in their lives in the most positive of ways. But if we're clear about what it is that we're communicating, if we are aware of the content and mindful of the stuff, and we're compassionate about it, we position ourselves to take this time that could have been sleeping and watching TV and instead turn it into an opportunity to really connect with our kids at a whole different level. And if we don't know how to do it naturally, That's what Healthy Families is for.
There you go.
Because
they do have really teen programs this summer.
absolutely, absolutely. There are a series of them, so certainly you can go to the websites and check those out. But one of the things that they do offer throughout the year is connecting with your teens. And connecting with your teens is a fantastic way to take some of the things that we were just talking about today and figure out how to use those in very practical, everyday ways. They can walk you through those steps. Because the fact is, not all of us even grew up with parents that connected with us.
Right.
So by default, we don't necessarily know how to do it with our kids, and it doesn't make us a bad parent. We just didn't know how to do it. It was never modeled for us. So the beautiful thing about having Healthy Families as a resource to our Hampton Roads community is the fact that there are people who can help you work through the stuff that you did not have the benefit of learning at your own pace with your own family.
And those kids can talk to each other.
That's very true.
And share, what's going on with them too. So it gives the teens both the reconnection with the parents and a peer group that they can kind of test things out on and understand family dynamics and get better themselves.
I mean, everybody gets to benefit from it.
Yep.
That's the one thing I love about the programs is that everybody can be a part of the process. So it's not like you're learning something and you're leaving your kid at home to do nothing. You get to bring your kid, and they encourage you to do that so that everybody is growing at their own developmental pace, and then you're coming back into the house and you're applying what it is that you've learned. And ultimately, the goal is always to create healthier families, because ultimately, healthy families is what creates healthy communities.
Wonderful. And I'm going to just go off on a limb here and say, in summer, you may want to reconnect with your partner or your parents or your friends, and you can use these exact same tips to make those connections.
That's absolutely right. That's a limb I would go with you off of.
I hope so. You never know.
That is absolutely true. The things that we learn in one area of our life can be applied in so many different areas, personally and even professionally. How we connect with each other has everything to do with the relationships that we develop, and ultimately our own personal happiness. We are happier when we're able to connect with the people we care about.
Right.
That is just a fact.
Right. Okay, well, thank you very much, Alvean.
Thanks.
Good to see you.
We'll do it again soon.
All right. And thank you for watching. I hope you remember that summer is a time to relax, but also to connect and recharge and get ready for the school year ahead. So use those communication tips with your teen, with your younger children, with your partner, with anybody to help reconnect this summer. Thank you for watching.